Have you ever wondered what was out there in the night sky? Stared up at the stars in the hopes of seeing something out of the ordinary? Have you ever heard unexplainable noises coming from a vacant room, or watched a shadow cross the wall in front of you? Have you asked yourself if there's life after this one, or if you had life before? What about strange creatures that are mythical and elusive? Have you experienced deja vu, or felt a prompting to leave because you felt you were in danger? What if tomorrow you were on the fringe?
Welcome to another episode of On the Fringe. I'm Mark, and we have Pam and Jess, aka Notebooks.
One of the days they're going to make us introduce ourselves.
I know.
I'm holding off for as long as possible.
Eventually,
I'm riding the wave till we don't have
when things slow down, we're going to redo the intro to include you guys. Phil is out today, but we've got a good show, and we're going to talk about time slips with some personal experiences and possibly some other famous examples. But before that, please take a look at our sponsors.
Hey, this is Mark with What If Tomorrow and What If Tomorrow on the Fringe. Be sure to check out our website, whatiftomorrowmedia.com, and look at our cool merch. We've got t-shirts, hoodies, posters, and more. Our affiliates are Duke Cannon, EMP Shield, My Patriot Supply, and Conflicted the Game. Or check out buymeacoffee.com/whatiftomorrow and buy us a coffee. And as always, be sure to like, comment, and share on both Facebook and YouTube. It helps get our content out to others and help our channel grow. Now on with the show.
Yay, and we're back and live and just crazy.
That's true.
And burning up. Whoo!
It is hot. We're in Kansas, and we're like 6 inches from the sun today.
Pretty much.
I was out in the shop today. We had 105 degree temperatures and 117 degree heat index. It's brutal, and it's going to be worse tomorrow, and the rest of the weekend looking good either.
Yeah.
No kidding.
But here we are, and we're going to talk about some time slips. I'd like to slip back into December.
Please, can we?
Yes.
Forward to October at least.
Or forward to October. That would be swell.
Yes.
Dear Lord.
But I don't want to miss the Paracon.
Oh, that's true. Hopefully it's not
if
as
you guys
hot.
are in the Caney area, September 30th, stop by the Paracon. It's free. We're going to have tons of speakers, a whole bunch of vendors, at least compared to last year.
We're going to have tons.
And
we're going to have a lot.
There's going to be a lot of networking, and, the speakers are going to be walking around. You'll be able to talk to them, be able to talk to us. It'll be a good time. We had a good time last year. And this year it looks like it's going to be even better. So
it is. And what's fun is all of our speakers and our panelists, they are super excited. And it's been a constant stream of communication with all of them. And I know Jess for sure has been in touch with everybody. But yeah, it's fun. We're going to have a good time. Super excited.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm excited. Well, we want to talk about time slips. Maybe we should talk about what a time slip is. For those of
time
us.
slips and time anomalies, and we're just going to talk about time mess ups in general. So we're going to hit missing time and added time and time slips and time storms and just anything related to it. So, and I think this is just going to be like more or less like a storytelling type of situation.
It is. I've got some stories from on here. I've even got some stuff from Parapsychology Today and the New York Times.
Awesome.
Time slips have become pretty mainstream. A lot of people who don't believe in anything else paranormal believe in time slips, and there is a lot of evidence to support time and dimensional slips. And it's actually one of those things in our circle that isn't poo-pooed by a lot of the quote unquote real scientists. So, all right.
It's a perfect topic. Actually, it's a perfect topic for tonight. Phil can't be here. But the three of us are all in an investigative group together, and the three of us have dealt with the situation on numerous occasions. So we all three have very personal, very shared stories that we can give some insight on.
Yeah, they're real. I'm telling you.
Some insanity. And we've told a few of these stories before on different show topics.
I think we've told them all, but never all on the same show, I don't think.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think we've ever told them in their entirety. Like it's like recap of what happened. So
right.
I have my handy notebook with all of our stuff in it.
Handy dandy notebook.
So yeah, as the topics come up, I have everything that I have there. So we can.
I missed Steve and his crayon and his notebook. Now I think he's using a cell phone or something.
Yeah, probably.
Oh,
yeah.
That's a bummer.
That's sad.
Yeah.
All right. Well, where do we want to start?
It's a good question.
Oh, I just got onto the chat, and hello, everybody. There are a lot of folks on tonight.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hello for stopping by. So, yeah, I mean, we the three of us, we've had numerous time slips. You guys had one in the sandhills out here. Probably the first one that we had.
Well, yeah, together, yeah.
Investigating one that Pam experienced.
Yeah, that's true. That is how that happened. What? No, it wasn't. Actually, now our group all together, the three of us plus Mike, that was the when we were out investigating. Jess and I went out. We were doing ley line work, weren't we?
Yeah, we were checking our hot spots and doing meter and ley line work. And that one was an added time where we got about, I think we estimated 54 extra minutes of time. And then the next one we had was at the nursing home at an undisclosed location. And that one was where Pam and Mark experienced we estimate about 40 or so.
Yeah, we lost about 45 minutes.
That is insane. Yeah. I still can't get over that.
And when Mike and I entered the building, the time rectified itself very quickly. So they were the only experiencers of that. Although later on in that evening, I think we were kind of in a bubble of some kind of a time shifting thing.
We were.
And then our next one was at the Sally house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that was the Sally house. What was it, about another 40 minutes?
About another 40 minutes of missing time, where we actually think, it started with that bird that was sitting perfectly still. That we couldn't get to move, and it didn't seem to be asleep. It was just something just fell in my studio.
Is that what that was?
There was a artalanche.
An artalanche? Well, it's a good thing you can't.
I can now not leave my studio, so I'm in here forever. So those of you who want to stick it out with me until I'm a skeleton, I'll be here.
Oh, no.
I see.
Do you want me to text your husband for help?
Oh, I have lots of stuff in here. I will make some kind of a white bag and
Alicia has a really good question here. How do you recognize missing time?
That is an extremely good question. And
That
honestly, the only way that we caught it when Jess and I were together is the fact that Jess is such a stickler about documenting everything that we do from pretty much every minute. And you may think it's overkill. It's not, because when it comes to recognizing these things, we would not probably have recognized it at all had it not been for the notes that she kept during the time that we were out there.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
we knew something was up, but we would not have been able to prove it.
That's how we found out about Sally House too, was the notes and the recordings. It was like, where were we? I mean,
yeah, when it just doesn't add up, that's when you can kind of really see it.
And there's usually something odd that happens during that time that sticks out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Janie Randalls calls them time storms.
Yes.
They're these little trigger points or red flags that will show you something uncommon is happening.
Kind of like a glitch in the matrix type thing.
Yeah. So if we think about our experiences, so we can go back to Pam and I. Later on, after we realized we had all this added time, we looked back at the situation and there were a lot of red flags that we did not recognize at the moment. When we were heading out, there was a jogger on our path. Not anything odd, but when we left the area, which should have been a good hour and a half or even more later, the jogger was only about 10 feet down from where he had been when we saw him originally. There was a gentleman parked, what we thought was maybe looking for deer running through, looking for deer paths. And when we went past him, he never made any motion. He didn't even blink. He just looked straight forward as if we weren't there, which is not something you could do. Where he was sitting at, we drove by very close to him, and you'd think that he would have at least moved or
at least been looking to make sure we weren't going to hit him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we passed him twice, and he was still in the same position in that truck, just sitting there. And while we were at the river, we were sitting at the river for quite a while there. I made note of how quiet it was, that you couldn't hear the bugs and there weren't any birds out, and the meters went completely dead while we were out there. And at the time we just thought, oh, it's just a quiet day and there's nothing going on with the meters. But looking back now, we were wondering if we were moving so fast against time that everything else was standing still to us. And maybe that gentleman in the truck didn't see us because we went by him so quickly.
Well, that kind of makes a little bit of sense, yeah.
It does, and it would explain. I mean, he didn't move at all. He was still as a statue and looking straight forward. And where we were, that's not a normal reaction. And especially where we're from, normally if you pass someone, it's just, it's the common thing just to, at least put your hand
usually you're going to get the hand up on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Like, yep.
And because when
or a nod or something.
The conversation being, oh man, we probably just encroached on his, deer. That's probably why he's sitting there like, we just messed up his deer watching or whatever he's doing. But when we came back by, he hadn't moved and he was still just exactly where he was. And we caught that as odd. And that's something that did stick out to us when we, later on, when we were discussing what had happened.
Yeah, those are basic kind of red flags we've had but that's the only time we've ever experienced a period where we gained time. Now, at the nursing home, that was a completely different situation. And I can tell the little bit of red flags I had from Mike and I's side, but I'd have to let Pam and Mark tell their side of the story. I don't know what their red flags were. The only thing that we had was, number one, what should have taken 15 minutes at the tops was going on an hour when we finally were concerned enough to go in. So there's that. And another marker for us was that we started trying to call them after 20 minutes. And the first rings went through to a voicemail. And then the next ring, it didn't go to anything. It would just click off. It wouldn't even ring. It was as if we were calling to a phone that didn't exist anymore, and we couldn't get a hold of either of them.
And we had service there. I texted my wife that night. So, I mean, it's not like we didn't have service.
And if I recall correctly, you two looked at your phones and there were no calls from us.
No.
Yeah, there was nothing on there.
No, we had nothing. Both of our phones were turned on too. They were not turned off because we weren't actively investigating it at that time. Mark and I had gone in for the sole purpose of taking baseline readings everywhere. So, you know, when you're doing an investigation, that's pretty laid back time when, you know, we leave everything open so we can communicate. So neither one of us had turned our phones off.
Right.
Or
and
had even muted them or anything.
What was weird was the sunlight thing. Because we were in full sunlight the whole time we were in there until we turned to talk to them and we turned back. But it's daylight and it wasn't. It was all of a sudden dark.
That was, and when you ask or when you say, you know, you didn't know what our red flags were, honestly, I don't think we had any red flags. And that's more concerning than anything because Mark and I really estimated we had only not even been in there maybe 15 minutes. Maybe.
Yeah, you know? Maybe.
And that was probably less time or more time than what we had actually been in there because we had gone in through the main setting areas and stuff where the dining area was and to a centrally located nursing station. And we had taken the West Wing. We had worked the north side of the West Wing and we had turned around at the end and we're coming back up the south side of the West Wing when Jess came in and was like, "Are you guys okay? Why are you not answering your phone?"
Yeah, and there was not a very big hallway, really.
No, it wasn't. There's probably, I don't know, is there even 10 rooms on one side?
I don't think so, no.
I don't even think that many. Maybe 6 at the most. Maybe 6 down each side.
Maybe 10 or 12 the whole wing, you know. It just wasn't very big. The rooms weren't very big. We only went in a few of them.
There was a couple we couldn't get into because they were used to store things, so we didn't even bother going in those. And I know there was at least 2 of those, but it was very strange because when we go in, I mean, we didn't like go in on hands and knees and, you know, with binoculars or microscopes looking at everything. We walk in and we do a sweep. We start at one side of the room and you walk around the room with your meter, you know, and you bring it around the other side. And Mark was doing that. I was writing everything down. So, you know, that's all we had accomplished.
And there wasn't much going on. There was, you know, the power was out in the building. So there was nothing really to pick up. So there was no reason to, you know, pause and look at anything because there was nothing there.
You know, that's another good point you just brought up. The fact that I'm thinking back to when you said, you know, the sun was still out. We didn't have flashlights on us. We were working off the sunlight in the rooms. We weren't even, there's no way that it could have been dark. We wouldn't have been able to see in the rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just a weird situation.
Yeah. That case was very interesting. We actually came up with a theory years later. Funnily enough, for everybody who's listening, one of the reasons why we keep so many notes is because we often find solutions or answers for things that have happened years before just by the sheer volume of stuff that we go through and the type of investigations we do and the research that we do. We are research crazy and we will find answers for things that happened years ago, or maybe not even an answer, but just kind of a clue into what it was that we were actually dealing with. The interesting thing about this situation was, so we know that when Mike and I walked in, the time somehow righted itself automatically. So their window went from bright sun to dark because when we came in,
the bubble
it was
popped.
getting dark. Yeah, the bubble popped. And I did keep tedious notes while we were in there. And as far as I know, we didn't lose any time when we were in there. But it wasn't until a few years later that I realized we may very well have lost time in there. But when we walked out of the building, the time rectified itself again.
And we may not have known.
Yeah, because I didn't keep notes afterwards. I didn't, look at my clock and go, "Oh, it's
We left the building
1 in the morning when it should have been 2." Unfortunately, I've never actually considered doing that. It's something I should probably do, make a marker of the time when we leave. But we have a running theory about this building. We think that it's almost kind of living in its own little time bubble. While we were in there, things were active inside that shouldn't be. Like Mark had said, the electricity was cut off from the building completely. They had cut it at the line, and it actually hadn't been on in 5 years, is what the owner had said. And while we were in there, we had an air conditioning vent come on above Pam and I that blew cold air for a good 20 seconds while the other vents stayed dead. We had Mark's favorite, the air deodorizers going off in every room that run off of batteries.
They were driving me nuts.
They were still running off of batteries after 5 years, and they still had deodorizer in them. In fact, one of them like spurted on Mark's neck. So, and he went berserk and started yanking batteries out of things.
Oh, it was I can't even remember the scent. It was god awful. It was like, oh, why would you even buy that?
Florida poo-poo.
Old people garden.
Mark, are you in the YouTube chat too?
Yes.
Okay. Willie's in there too, and he had some questions for us.
All right. Willie, do you guys believe that if there are problems with the timeline, that there is a division similar to that which is in Loki, at least the show Loki, that maintains the space-time continuum and eliminates any threats to the current thread line or a paradox?
I haven't seen Loki.
Loki's
I've not watched it, so I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, you can get the gist of it where you see where he's asking that Loki that it maintains the space-time continuum and eliminates any threats to the current thread or paradox. Basically, when anything happens, it's kind of like, I don't know, the Langoliers, where they come in and they just eat everything. They change it. Things go the way that they're supposed to go based on whatever's happening. That's a good question. I mean, it would make sense.
Well, I think if it did that, we wouldn't notice it.
No, and that's what I'm wondering. How would we know? But I know
a lot of people have. I was going to say, a lot of people have talked about watching the time fix itself. Like, there were several stories in the Jenny Randall's books, people talking about how they'd lost time on the way to work. Like they showed up way earlier than they should have, even though they took their normal route. And while they were looking at their clock radio, wondering what the hell just happened, they watched it literally flip up to the correct time.
I have, we know someone personally that had that happen to them. Ken did. Yeah, I agree, Willie. It is pretty good in regards to time travel stuff.
Enzo has a good one, though. Will the agents that fix timelines be temporal mechanics?
I
mean, maybe. I mean, I don't really know if there's anything to fix. I'm not sure if we're slipping in time or slipping in dimensions that are in a slightly different time.
That's another question. Did we slip? And when we moved over into the next line, that time wasn't quite exactly where ours was. So we dropped back or we came forward. You could go in a million and one directions. We can just blow our brains out tonight.
The whole multiverse theory is accepted by many scientists because that's the only way quantum physics work. There has to be a bunch of different universes for them to borrow quarks and muons or whatever the hell they are. Snarks. There's so many subatomic particles I don't even know. But in order for that to work, there has to be multiple universes. So maybe it's kind of like, I don't know if anybody has read any of the old sci-fi books where as you jump timelines, they're further away from every universe is just like a couple months out from the other ones, even though they're identical. So it might be winter in one universe and summer in another. So, I mean,
it could be. It could be like glitch in the Matrix. It could be that something glitched.
Yeah.
And messed with the timeline.
Well, and you know, when you start talking about, they're talking about how the human brain possibly operates in multiple dimensions through quantum entanglement. Well, wouldn't that explain psychic powers and magic and all sorts of things?
It could. It very well could. And there's some good discussions going on in chat here too. Inza said it could be a symptom of others traveling through time, and we just kind of get caught in the wake. And Willie's talking about, you know, like it's fabric in time where it's rippling. And the vibration alone would do it for sure.
It could be all kind. I mean, the theories are endless. We could brainstorm this all night, and we might hit on the right thing and never know
it. Probably.
There's so many different like variables and things. Like I was on Christy Campbell's podcast a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about different time stuff. And I was actually telling her a story. I don't think I've ever told it on this podcast before. Pam and Mark know it, but it was interesting. It was like a time slip, but it wasn't. And it rectified itself in the end. So I'm just going to tell it because it's not long. So this happened about 2 years ago. I was on my way to work one morning, traveling out of Caney on a road that I know very well, and so well I could probably sleep on the drive and still make it there just fine. It was 6 a.m. and the sun was just coming up, and I was actually enjoying the drive that morning. It was a Sunday, so the roads were empty. And I just remember the grass was looking so green and pretty that morning with the sun hitting it. And I'm traveling this road I've always known, and there's a little curve in this road. And I took this little curve, but on the other side of the curve was not what it should have been. It was literally back about 2 miles where I had been previously. Now, this was startling, especially, you know, on a road that you know so well, to have it felt like I was replaying my trip again. I was literally back 2 miles previous, heading in the same direction. And this time when I went through it, because I'm nutty here. I'm just thinking, what the heck is going on? I'm seeing all of these houses and fences and trees that I know so well, but now they're far too close together. There's not that expanse in between each one, and they're coming up faster and faster and faster and faster. And when I hit that curve again, I take the curve and everything starts stretching back out to where it was supposed to be. And then everything was correct again. And it freaked me out so bad. I pulled over and I checked the time, and I hadn't lost any time at all. I was right where I should have been at the right time. But I felt so weird and off balance. I actually recorded the story. I got to the side of the road because I was too freaked out to drive. I recorded the story on my phone, and then I sent Pam a message right away so she would know, because I needed like some kind of a marker. I needed somebody else to know. So there was a marker for myself, and I went off to work, and I actually got there at the regular time. No missing time whatsoever, but I got to spend the morning dealing with that in my head. But so what was that?
That's weird. Willie asked if it might be lensing or something like that, and it could be. Alicia asked, do you think it's possible to gain or lose time while you're sleeping?
I would think so.
I would think
most likely that in the dream state, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that happen when we're asleep that we have no clue.
Well, I feel like you're closer to your doppelgangers in the other universes when you're asleep, because I have this theory, whereas there are, say, 100 me's in different universes, we're all me. We all have the same soul, but at any given point, my consciousness could be paying attention in one or two or more.
Mm-hmm.
And Willie says that's why he always wondered if deja vu is a sign of the timeline being adjusted, because you have this memory of something that's already been lived.
Yeah.
And that's possible. I have had several very vivid deja vus. One so vivid, I actually told the guy next to me what the principal on stage was getting ready to talk about. And I should have had no idea, but I'd done it the day before.
So does that mean,
timeline
is it
or
like
another
Groundhog
timeline?
Day
I don't
where
know.
we reset and move back, you know?
Maybe. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I could have had a Groundhog Day episode right there, because I distinctly remember we had that assembly, and then the next day we had the very same assembly with the very same words. We were sitting next to the same people wearing the same clothes. It was just weird, and it really upset me for a while, because I was like 10, 11. I mean, I was old enough to really remember it and understand what was going on, and enough for it to freak me out.
I have a story. I haven't got to tell either one of you yet. I may wait till Jess comes back, though, so she can hear this.
Jess
I haven't even told her yet.
Jess has been adjusted. The adjusters have adjusted Jess.
Oh, no. Willie, up to the 11th dimension. Yeah, they believe there is up to 11 dimensions.
You know, maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
Enzo has a good one here. I've experienced that before. I knew what strangers were going to say before they say it, like I'd already lived through it before. Makes for a boring conversation. Well, yes,
or an interesting one.
Kind of a boring conversation if you're not freaking out because you're confused. I mean, I was a confused preteen anyway, and then that happens. I'm like,
okay, Jess, since you're back, I told Mark that I had a story. I hadn't even had a chance to tell you yet. So I was out of state over the weekend, and we were in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it was me and Shaw Thompson, she's part of the Amok group on the other podcast. And then Debbie Thorson, which she's in with Geeks with Shaw. And I was driving, and we were on 69, and we were just outside of Fort Wayne. I don't know how far out, maybe like 30 miles out. And it was about 12:45-ish at night. Anyway, we're driving along. We've been talking, carrying on and whatever, just normal thing. And there's a lot of road construction going on. And, the roads are like 3 and 4 lanes, things like that, just normal stuff. I'm driving along, and then out of nowhere, and I kid you not, out of nowhere, this small car appears just to the left of my Jeep, and it's got no muffler on it. So it's like, wah, all of a sudden. And Debbie's sitting behind me. She almost throws her phone. I jumped. It scared me so bad. And then it just goes blasting by us. And we're like, where the hell did
there is no way that was sneaking up on you?
No, there's no way. Number one, we would have heard that at least a half a mile away coming up behind us. And number two, we were thinking about it later, and we've talked about this stupid car the entire weekend. How did that happen? Where did it come from? And Debbie and I are both of the mind that it either didn't have its headlights on, because we never saw it ever. And honestly, I didn't see anything strange after it passed us, so I'm assuming it had headlights on then. Where did it come from? It wasn't a ghost car, obviously, because it kept moving down.
It was probably there the whole time. You just weren't quite in sync with it.
That's what we're wondering.
That's what I'm guessing.
I mean, it was a little beat up, different. The door was a different color than the hood kind of car, with no muffler. And you know how loud those are. You can hear those suckers everywhere. And nothing. We heard nothing until Debbie was like, I almost died, because it was just there, just this extremely loud noise right beside her door, and then right beside me, just immediate. We were both like, ugh. Yeah, it was strange.
What if that car moved into our dimension at that exact moment? Maybe they had just had a car accident in theirs and moved over, skipped a line into ours. And it just happened to be right by yours.
That's
could have been.
Yep. I wonder what he saw. I wonder if we just appeared out of nowhere.
You could have. Maybe that's why he like shot off so fast. He was scared. He was like, I'm getting the hell out of here.
Enzo says it seems like time around Kenny has a bad connection and is lagging with the rest of the universe. Well, the internet certainly is that way sometimes. So
yeah,
I mean,
we got janky internet around here.
Yep, so time's probably that way too. We are that way because we are in a triangle from hell. We have ley lines, we have rivers, we have major bodies of water, and we have a huge magnetic anomaly, and we're living on a bed of quartz. I don't know how it gets any freakier than that. And because of that, we have
a high water table.
Yeah, we're home to Bigfoot and cryptids and weird time space anomalies
and me
and Mark.
I wasn't even born here. They imported me. Special. But you can call me.
Yeah.
Ed.
We can sniff out our own. We were like, there's a weirdo. Let's drag him in.
Yep, for sure.
Yep.
And
you know what? It's fine being weird because weird people have more fun, I've noticed.
Absolutely. 100%.
They're not worried about what people think.
Life would be so boring if we didn't ask the what if questions, if we didn't, and there you go. There's the name of your podcast right there. The What If Tomorrow.
So cryptids, there's another one. I just mentioned cryptids. So I have a personal theory that the petrosaurs, the flying dinosaurs and stuff that people are seeing that they're calling cryptids, are probably actually real ones, and we're seeing like a little window. We're seeing through a little window. And they're like slipping to our time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense. What if there's just, and we talk about that with ghosts too. What if there's just a thin spot in the veil occasionally where they can slip through and then slip back through?
Exactly.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Enzo says, I'd like to investigate those time anomalies there, but I don't know what equipment I would use to measure it. Your wristwatch and a notebook.
We actually tried to do that when Pam and I had that original added time thing a little while later, because it actually, everybody thinks that like we were like right on it. We were like, this is amazing happening and we're going to write a scientific study on it. No, it took us weeks before we came to grips with it enough to truly discuss it and really start bringing up all the red flags that we had seen. We still hadn't even put that all together. And eventually, it was probably months later, we opted to test it out with the guys. And we like thought of every way we could. We had like mechanical stopwatches and we had a digital watch and a regular wind-up watch. And we were like, okay, we're going to set them all together here. I think we were at Pam's house and we got them all on the exact time.
In the dining room.
Yeah. And some of those got left behind there at the house, and some of them went with us. And I kept time marks, and it didn't matter what we did, we could not get it to happen again. And I don't know if it has ever happened again to us out there. Now, it could have before. Maybe we weren't watching the times like we had that time, but it hasn't happened since, as far as I know. So
I know. Enzo said you'd need at least 2 atomic clocks. GPS clocks may work. That's a good idea.
Well, the atomic clocks work on a transmission from Colorado. So if they're both receiving the transmission, I mean, you'd have to be able to look at both of them at the same time, because if you're in the time anomaly, it would be different. And then when you left, it would connect with the central atomic
reset
clock
itself, isn't it?
and reset itself.
Yeah.
So you'd have to be really watching it.
Your second problem is how do you instigate the time warp? How do you get that? how do you trigger it?
Mhm.
I don't know
we
of any
haven't figured
place you
that
could
out.
just go to
You
where it
start
happens.
with a step to the
So-
left and then jump to the right.
Nice.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help it.
My bad. I know. I say stuff all the time.
You know, another one that happened, and it was well before I met you guys, was the disappearing house, and we've talked about that on here before, I believe.
Which right out in that same area where you guys were at.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Interesting
right
note.
there.
We sat there for a while at that exact spot. So
Yeah, we
was
did.
that part of the trigger?
Who knows?
Who knows?
You know, who knows?
Meanwhile, the disappearing, reappearing house, we figured out where it was because we found the foundations on Google Maps.
We did.
And currently, that place is so overgrown you can't hardly see it. There's grass so high. It's insane.
And the trees have changed along the road too, where you can't even look in and see anymore.
Yeah.
At least not until the winter.
Jason Robbins says there was one morning I was driving to work, turned on the road to Leeds to where I work, and then I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, was back in front of my apartment, hand on the door to my truck. That's kind of a
Wow.
classic slip, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is a classic slip, you know. And that kind of brings into play, not to say that I think that you were abducted, but you hear this from abductees too, or potential abductees, that they were one place doing one thing and they blinked and all of a sudden they're at home in bed, or you know, they're standing at their sink or in a completely different place than they just had been.
The question for Jason is, did he physically move from almost to work back to his truck, or did his consciousness jump back to where he was a little while ago?
It depends. That kind of reminds me, and you hear these stories all the time, but there was one that was really close to home to us. It happened back in the early 2000s. There was a group of kids that were out of Sallisaw, Oklahoma. It's not too far away from us. It was a guy and two girls, and they had gone out that night to go watch the high school basketball game, and had gone to the game, enjoyed themselves, and had climbed back in the car and were going to head home. And to get back home, they didn't live inside Sallisaw, and they had to take a little route of the turnpike to get back onto their road to get back to their little town. And they were on this turnpike, and they said the radio started to cut out and fuzz a little bit, and the driver, the boy, reached down to change the channel, and he did. And when he looked back up, they were on a completely different road. And they drove and drove and drove before they finally found a building with its lights on, and it was a little gas station, and they walked in there, and they were in Alabama. But it was the right time.
Yeah.
So
And
they did a jump in time and space.
exactly. And they ended up having to call their moms, their families, and were like, we're in Alabama. And they thought they were fibbing for the longest time, because even if they had left their houses that evening and not gone to the game and just started driving, there's no way they would have reached Alabama. They wouldn't even reach the bottom of Oklahoma.
Possible.
Yeah, there's no way.
Yeah, and it was written about quite a lot. They ended up going to the police station wherever they were in Alabama and waiting. The police put them up for the night because it took their parents that long to get down to them to bring them back up. So
that's a weird one.
Something's
weird.
going on with our Facebook, Mark. Chris and Alicia both moved over to YouTube because it was just showing a holding pattern basically on Facebook.
Janky. Well, it's Facebook.
Yeah, I don't know what was up with that, but just heads up, just in case you hear anything else about
that. Enzo says Jason's story is similar to other reports that usually end with an accident where they are snapped back to before the accident. They delay their travel, which prevents the accident. That's also very similar to the theory of jumping timelines. Let's say you're in a bad accident and you might have died, and then you go to the next closest timeline.
where you're alive, but you still feel janky about it.
Yeah.
Well, and I know I've heard of there's numerous stories, especially on Reddit and different places where people, I know in particular, one that comes to mind is a girl that was in a car with her mom and I think siblings, and she really remembers this accident occurring. And she said all of a sudden, right when all these bad things were happening, she blinks and they're like on another street, or, you know, they're somewhere else, and they're going down the road, and she's freaking out. And her mom's like, what is wrong? And she's like, oh my God, we just about died. What happened? And no one else in the car has any inkling of what she's talking about. So I would assume at that point they've jumped a timeline. And I think, well, I know we've talked about this before, like converging timelines, where if you die in one, you're going to move over to another and continue. So does that mean that we've got all these versions of ourselves that as these timelines end, as the lives end, and then we converge into one? What does that mean? You know, how does that work? Is everyone going to converge into one big timeline at the same time?
I mean, that's the theory with the whole looking glass thing. So
I don't know if they'd all converge into one line. I like my fairy ring theory, where we're existing in all of these lines all at once.
At the same time.
Like Mark said, our souls are in all of these lines, but occasionally our consciousness, our full consciousness, moves into separate lines. And maybe if we do pass in one line, that consciousness moves over into the next nearest line. But I think maybe once you hit your end of time, like your old age death, that's probably the end of that for you. But while your soul's still existing in some kind of way in any one of those other lines, you'll be in that line.
You know, that's extremely interesting, because you know, there's always this thought, it sounds that like quantum leap. Here for a reason. You know, we're here to do a certain task or learn a certain lesson or what have you. So what if, in order to do that, you know, we've got human bodies which are infallible. You know, they're going to fall apart. Something's going to happen. We're actually pretty fragile creatures, if you think about it. So what if, to keep that from completely ruining the process, they do split into all these, like if there's 11 dimensions, what if there's 11 pieces of souls that go to these different dimensions, and oh damn, you fell out of the tree, you know, and died, or you know, the dinosaur ate you or whatever, and you died. So what if, as those happen, you've still got 11 chances to get it right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To make it through
exactly. And that goes.
But if they're too wildly different, that could really cause you a lot of confusion.
And
exactly. That's where you get Mandela effect.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
they also say that people who have moved a lot become very cognitive and take on what others would think are psychic or medium type powers. And it's been kind of proven that people who have had near-death experiences tend to have interesting little quirks to them. And ones who have had multiple are very quirky. And I do like that old theory that, you know, schizophrenics are people who have literally jumped every damn line and can cross back into all of them.
Now they're wide open to everything.
Yeah, they are literally having a million conversations at once in their head. So I think it makes the most sense. Probably totally wrong.
Oh yeah, well, probably not a darn thing we're saying is anywhere close to right, but
it's fun to think about.
It is fun to play that what if game.
Yeah, and that's a question Jason put in here. I could have used a time slip like that a few months ago when I got hit by a pickup truck. Would have been handy to zip back in time, delay leaving my mom's house. Yeah, so I mean, what's the difference? Why would you slip in one, you know, in one case and not the other?
But what if he did? What if he did die? What if he did have an accident and he died and he simply moved over into a line where he just got into a fender bender and he was okay?
Yeah, I mean, that could have been.
You don't
How bad
know.
was the accident? You don't know.
Yeah. maybe you just got sideswiped in this one as opposed to actually being deceased in the other.
Yeah. There was a similar story to the one that Pam was telling. I had found a story back when we did a Timeslip show. God, it's been years ago. But I had found a very interesting one about a girl who was on a family vacation and they were driving and she watched in slow motion as they got into a horrible wreck. She said she actually watched her mom's head come off.
Oh, God.
Because they hit a semi and the semi was shearing off the car. And the last thing she remembered was the metal of the semi coming towards her head. And then she blinked. And the next second, they were literally on the same strip of road. And nothing had changed except for the song on the car. The radio was playing a different song. And she was physically ill. She said her head was pounding and she had the taste of blood in her mouth for an hour.
Wow.
And she just sat there quietly. She said she didn't feel as if she was a part of the vehicle for a little while. Like she was almost a watcher inside the vehicle. And then she slowly kind of felt like she was more in her body. And then she kind of was one with what was going on again. But she never forgot that. And she mentioned it to her mom like years later. And her mom was just like, you must have had a weird dream or something. But that woman was like, looking back now, I'm pretty damn sure that I died in that line. And I somehow skipped into some type of dimension that I was alive. So.
Yeah. And
interesting that she was
I don't think it's a common thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it happens enough for there to be anecdotal evidence, but I just don't think it happens to everybody every day. I think that would be too much. I think I think we'd all be living in 12 Monkeys like Enzo's talking about.
Yeah.
Movie and TV show 12 Monkeys. Many schizophrenics were actually sensitive to the changes in the timeline that the time travelers were making. I don't think it's all that common. I don't think it happens every time something happens.
I don't think it does either. My question is, I wonder why. Is there a reason that would trigger you to jump, or is it random, or is it just luck of the draw? I have no idea.
It's like you take the 20-sided dice in D&D and roll it for the hard 20.
Much. Yeah.
Yeah. I got 20, so I'm going to skip the timeline.
Right.
Jason said in that timeline, he got pretty messed up. Laundry list of injuries. Who knows? Maybe in an alternate timeline, I saw him in time to jump out of the way or only got clipped instead of getting hit as hard as I was. It could be.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe
we don't know anything. We really don't. We're speculating. But some of these theories just make too much sense.
So, all of us speak from experience. Each one of us has had a near-death experience. And I'm going to tell mine because I think it will kind of help anybody who's listening who doesn't quite understand how this could happen. I think I have an exact moment where I moved a line. So when I was 8 years old, my family went with a whole bunch of other families to do a canoe trip on Knoll River in Missouri. At the time, the river wasn't as taken care of as well as it is now. It wasn't the cleanest river. And I recall when I was little, the adults were concerned because there had been a pretty bad storm the weekend before we went, and there were some trees down on the river. And the people who were handing out canoes and paddles were warning everybody, watch out for the trees, watch out for this, and watch out for brush that's come down in the river. And we went anyway. And my sister and I were in the back of a canoe, and my mom and my dad were in the front. And we went quite a ways down the river. Everything was fine. We did have to watch out for fallen trees and some bad spots. And but we all had paddles, and we kind of worked our way around them. And we hit a curve in the river, and there was a full-size tree down. It had fallen straight across the river. And what had happened is that it had been there for long enough, and it was a faster part of the river, and it had created a suction where the water shot down underneath and had made a huge whirlpool. And the side of the river that you could kind of get around it in was very shallow. So as we were coming on this, everybody kind of bottlenecked trying to get around this tree. And unfortunately, the suction was just too powerful on our canoe, and it sucked us sideways, and we hit the side of the tree like this. We hit up against it like this, and the suction automatically took our canoe straight over. Now, my dad managed to grab onto the actual tree and hang on. My mom got sucked down and went through the branches underneath, and she shot out about a quarter mile down the river. Now, my sister was 6 at the time and very, very tiny. And I had the thought, smart me, to grab a hold of her as we were falling out of the canoe. And I was trying to kick, and she was like between my legs. I had a hold of her underneath her arms. And I was kicking as hard as I could. And we were still getting sucked down, and it was getting darker and darker. And I was watching what little bit of light from the up above us slowly slip away. And after a little while, you just almost stop fighting. And I remember at the moment when, your lungs are burning and you want air so bad. I remember everything went really still. And I saw these little sparkles around me, and I always wondered what the sparkles were. They looked like they were outside from me, like maybe they weren't sparkles from losing oxygen, but they might have been. But I was so far away. I remember it was so cold down there towards the bottom. And I'm just getting ready to blank out. I'm getting the little tunnel vision. And all of a sudden, I was ripped out of the water and thrown up on the bank. And I still had a hold of my sister, apparently. It took him another minute to get me to breathe, just screaming at me. And I come to find out later that one of the other men from one of the other canoes had gone out onto that tree to help my dad get out. And when he was walking back down the log, he said he saw my hair, I had it in a braid, floating in the top of the water. And he reached down and grabbed me out. But I know I was nowhere near that water. The light from the top was so, so far away, and it was so cold down where I was at. So how did I suddenly get from down at the bottom to close enough to the top for my hair to float at the top of the water? I should have been able to put my arm up and wave at him if I was that close. So there was a shift at some point where I went from blanking out and drowning at the bottom of that river, caught in all those branches, to suddenly being back at the top of the water again, close enough for somebody to grab my hair. And I will tell you something, before the age of 8, I wasn't anything interesting. I had never really seen a whole lot, or, I was just a normal little kid. And then after that was when, boy howdy, I started getting all the fun stuff in my life. And it snowballed from there. And I know that Mark and Pam both have stories about things that have happened to them, and then suddenly there was new interesting things in their lives, a lot of deja vu and time slips and other fun stuff. So that kind of gives you an idea of how that might occur. I know with almost certain fact that something like that occurred to me that day. Something happened. Because I
blanked so much of my out, I can't tell you much about it. I know I went in the water, I blacked out, and the next thing I knew, I was over a tree puking my guts out of my lungs.
Yeah. And
busted all the blood vessels in my eyes. But in true redneck fashion, I did finish the day fishing.
Oh, God.
So, I mean.
Well, there's that.
You got to have your priorities, man. You almost drowned. You're not dead. Get your fishing pole. You got to finish the day.
Mine, if we're sharing stories, I'll go ahead and tell mine too. I know we've referenced it a few times. I don't know if I've actually ever completely told the entire story on here, though. When I was in 1994, I was 25, and my son had turned 5 3 days before this. So this was October 23rd. And I was on the highway taking someone home. And if you've ever been in Caney, where we live, there's a Sonic on the north side of town. When this happened, the Sonic wasn't there yet. And on the south side of the street from Sonic is a cemetery, and across the street's a high school. And my son was a hot mess, and he was in the back seat and supposed to be in his car seat, and he was back there unbuckling his car seat and trying to get out of it. So I'm like, oh great, so I'm going down the road telling him to get back in his seat. He's not doing it. And in fact, he crawls up in the back window and lays down and is looking out the window, and I'm yelling at him, and I look, and of course there's a police officer right there at the high school. So I'm like, great, hit my blinker, go to turn the car, looking at my kid, and realize there's another car coming from the opposite direction. So I straighten my car out as fast as I can, and it wasn't quite fast enough. It hit my side head on. And I remember it in slow mo. I'm sure I passed out at some point because I broke my nose, and I don't remember ever hitting the steering wheel with it, but I did. But I know the car spun, and it landed in the ditch, almost in the cemetery, which is kind of ironic. And when we landed, the girl that was in the front seat with me, she had hit her face on the windshield, so her nose was cut. And it was freaky because her face left a perfect imprint of her face in the windshield because it had the safety glass on it. And, my son, he was 5. He just bounced around in the back seat. He was fine. People saw immediately what was happening, pulled over to help, and opened the back door and got him out, and got the girl that was with me out just fine. But on my side that I got hit, I was completely stuck. I had bent the steering wheel around the steering column, and I did not have my seatbelt on. And that's probably, honestly, my saving grace, is because my head was stuck up above the steering wheel on the dashboard. And the way I was twisted around, I think it was this way, because I could look down and I could see my leg, and I could see my leg end in bone, and my foot was off to the side. And I remember the person with me saying, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I broke my leg." And she was like, "Oh God, okay, just stay there." Well, I couldn't move, so that was fine. It was easy to do. And so, ambulance gets called, the police are coming, there's a whole crowd there and everything, and they can't get me out. So they had to get the jaws of life. And it took, 30, 45 minutes to cut me out of the car. In the meantime, they had the other 2 in the ambulance. They got me out, got me in the ambulance. And when I got into the ambulance, we learned then that, well, I'm sure they already knew, I learned then that I had severed the femoral artery in my leg too. And so it just started gushing blood when we were in the ambulance. And we get to the hospital, and the doctor's like, you have no pulse in your foot. We're going to try to reattach it. And they were able to. So I kept my leg for a while then. But, and for those who don't know, I currently do not have a leg. 5 years, I went through 5 years of surgeries and things, and was not able to keep it. I finally ended up losing it below the knee, which was the best little outcome. It's not a problem. But at the time, my son was obviously freaked out. He was telling everybody, my mama's going to die. And, we thought it was just because of what he'd witnessed and all these good things. He didn't want to leave the hospital. My mom had him, and he didn't want to leave at all. And I finally got to come home after like 2 weeks, I think. And I had broken ribs, broken nose, completely shattered leg. And I ended up, I think the diagnosis was a left tib fib compound fracture. So that basically means bone came out. So I can't remember if it was like probably 2 more weeks later, we got my son into therapy to see if that would help him, because he would not leave me. He was just like telling everybody, my mama's going to die. I'm not leaving. My mama's going to die. To the point where it started really freaking me out, made me not want to go to sleep, because what the hell? What does he know that we don't know? And finally, one day I was asleep on the couch, and he was right inside the kitchen door with my mom, and they were doing something. I don't remember if he was helping her make cookies or something very grandmotherly. And he finally said, do you know why I think Mama's going to die? And my mom was like, excited. Oh my gosh, she's finally going to tell us. And so she was trying to play it cool, and she was like, no, I don't know. Why didn't you tell me? And he said, because I saw her angel. I saw the top of her head through the top of the car and her top of her wings. And she had her arms around my mama. And she was going to take her to heaven with her. And he said that there was a light coming down from heaven, shining on her and everything. And we, at the time, were like, holy hell, what did he see? He was 5, so he drew a picture at the time. And, it's a 5-year-old perception. But you could see exactly what he meant. And I wish I still had that. I don't know what happened to it. It's somewhere along the way I've lost track of it. But he will tell you, he will be 34 in October, and he will still tell you he saw Mama's angel, and he can describe her to you. So, yeah, it was pretty wild. But that was what we figured out at the time. And they don't know why. I don't know why my leg didn't bleed until I got in the ambulance. But because I was stuck in the car for a good 30, 45 minutes, I should have bled out. The only way I wouldn't have is if it would have been pinched off, and where it was and the way everything was situated, I don't know how it could have been pinched off. So really strange. But yeah, really cool, really interesting. Gives me goosebumps every time I talk about it. But yeah, so yeah, there's something to it. There's something out there, because my kids saw it.
Same. Every time you tell that, I get all twitchy.
Yeah, it's freaky, isn't it? Freaks me out too. I get all talking about it.
Yeah, near-death experiences. There's something to them.
Ooh, Enzo, that's a good thought. I need to ask him. He said, I wonder if it looked like one of the butterfly people from Joplin.
Oh, I don't know. I think the butterfly people are kind of an anomaly all their own. I've never really heard of another situation where a mass amount and they all look like butterflies.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting one. We should have Lisa on sometime to talk about that. She's like the guru on the
fairies, possibly.
They acted like angels.
Yeah, they did.
There's handfuls of kids who talked about them literally coming through, like morphing through the ceilings of their homes and resting their wings around their entire families. And they said they felt like they had this golden barrier around them, and entire houses would get blown out, but somehow the one little corner they were huddled in was perfectly fine. Just all over the swath of Joplin that the tornado hit. So yeah, she loves telling that story. She'd love that. Come on and tell that story. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know why that particular thing happened to me. I have no idea. Just like, you two don't either. We have no idea.
Oh, I know why mine happened, because I was stupid and got in a flat bottom boat with oars in a river that was out of its banks.
Well, okay, that was a little dumb. But why did you survive it is what I meant. Why did we survive when so many other people don't in similar situations? But no. Are we here for a reason? Obviously, there's got to be. I know we all want to think that we are, so I'm sure we probably are. We just don't know what that is. I don't know.
I don't know. Still gives me chills.
It does. Every time I talk about it, it freaks me out a little bit, because it's nice to know they're there, though. Mine's probably like this 99% of the time.
I just wish I remembered more. Or maybe I don't. Maybe I'm glad I don't remember any more than I do. Although
it's probably your mind's way of protecting you that you don't.
Getting all the water out of my lungs, that I remember vividly, and the double pneumonia I got later.
Oh, no. Dennis.
Dirty river water in your lungs.
But for whatever reason, we have all had these pretty severe life-altering experiences that seem to have unlocked something in us. So I don't know.
Interesting.
It is.
All right.
So what do we want to talk about next? Do we want to talk about
know.
actual like time slips, like people going back in time or people coming forward in time?
I mean, we can. There's plenty of them to talk about.
There is.
Chris just asked if after that, is that when things change for you? Yeah, for the most part, I'd always been interested in things like this. But to actually have experiences of this magnitude, well, I can't even say that. I don't know. That's a good question, Chris, because I mean, I saw that disappearing house. I was 10. That's 15 years before my accident. So I don't know. Maybe it enhanced it a little.
Maybe,
because I will have to think on that. I'm trying to think time-wise.
Maybe that wasn't your first experience with that, but it's the one that you remember.
You know, I did fall out of the back of my dad's truck and landed on my head on a rock on my forehead right here.
I was gonna say, I'm sure the river isn't the only one I had. I have a very vivid memory of when I was about 10. I was I was driving my bike way too fast on our dirt driveway, and there was an old oak tree that was right on the edge of it, and there was a spot where there was a big root that was bumped up, and I loved hitting that with my bike tire to pop it. You know, you try to do the tricks on your bike, and I was doing that one day and I hit it wrong, and when I hit it, it popped the bike up, but it popped it towards the tree, and I went at it head first. And I remember I hit that tree because I remember the impact. It was the worst pain I've ever felt, well, at that age. And I remember that blinding black red you get when you hit something really hard. And I heard my bike crunch underneath of me because I hit that tree so hard. And I got knocked out, as far as I know, because I woke up on the ground, and I don't know how much later it was on, you know, it was a kid. I wasn't paying attention to time. I just thought, man, I'm in big trouble because my bike's dead and I know I'm about to be a bloody mess. And I stood up and I was wobbly, but my bike was 3 feet away and perfectly fine. And I had no bump or scratch or anything on my head.
Oh, that's not good. That's a closed head injury.
I had, but there was nothing. I never had a bruise or anything, and my bike was fine, as if I'd never hit the tree. Like I just passed out right there in the driveway.
Ooh, interesting.
So
you might have bit the big one there.
You may have.
I fell out of a truck once.
I think haven't we all fallen out
at
of a truck?
65 miles an hour going down the highway.
Oh, not that fast.
No.
I was we were at my uncle's house, and my dad had a bunch of empty shotgun shells in the back of his truck. So they put me in the back of the truck, probably to use as a playpen, because I was only like 4 or 5 years old. And I was taking these and lining them up on the bumper, and I had dropped one, down where the tailgate thing is. So I reached over to grab it and went too far and landed right on a rock on my head on the driveway.
I was fortunate not to hit the ground. The young lady sitting next to me had remarkably good reflexes and grabbed me around the legs and held me while I was this far away from the pavement as it went.
Enzo, I will tell the disappearing house.
I was going to say, go ahead and tell your story.
Yeah,
I'm going to go grab a drink real quick. So
okay, that'll work.
I'll be right back.
That will work. Okay, so the disappearing house story. When I was about 10 years old, and the reason I remember that age is because my brother was driving and he was 14, and we had an old green Pinto, and it was a little stick shift one. I do remember that. But my brother collected beer cans, and he liked the screw top ones. This was back in I can't remember what year it was, late 70s, early 80s. And so basically any trash pile out by an abandoned house or, wherever was fair game, because that's usually where you would find these things. So we're going out in the sandhills and we're looking around. It was summertime, and we just happened to be going down a side road, and we saw this old house with a barn standing beside it. And so he turns down the drive, or down the little lane that goes to it, and we turn in the driveway, and there's this like a big trash heap between the house and the barn. So we get out and we're looking, and he found, if I remember correctly, I think he found like 2 cans with screw tops on them that were in relatively good shape. So he put those in the car, and we decided to look around a little bit, and we walked into the barn, and it was pretty, it was obviously abandoned. There was like old rotted tack hanging on the wall and things like that. And at the opposite end, the door was open. So we walked through, and my brother was in front of me, and he kind of poked his head out, and he was like, "Oh, crap." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, we probably need to get out of here." So I looked out the door, and when I did, what I saw was like up against the wall of the barn and like in a half ring out were these little bitty animal skulls, and they were different colors, like painted different colors. And I was like, okay, yeah, no, we need to leave. There's nothing right about that. So we turn around, we start walking back through the barn. And about that time, we hear somebody walk across the loft. Yeah, lost the word. We hear him walk across the loft, and we're like, okay, we got to go. So we take off running, and we jump in the car, and he goes to pull out of the drive. And instead of turning back to the left, he turns right. Well, I guess it's the opposite way. Instead of turning right, He turns left. And we go flying down this road, and it dead ends. And we're like, crap, now we got to turn around and go back by this place, So we do, and he's flying, and we're looking, obviously. And we don't see the opening into the driveway. We just see fence, and it's like the barbed wire fence. And so we're like, wait a minute, something's not right. So we get really brave, and he backs up. And you know how you can tell, like on some driveways, or not driveways, but fencing, like they'll take old barbed wire and wrap around it like a piece of a tree, basically, and use that as a fence post or a gate. That's what.
It's an old style gate. There's a section of the fence where one post hooks to another one with baling wire at the top and bottom.
And that's what we thought this would be, but it wasn't. It was unbroken, because those you can always tell they're a little bit looser and they hang funny. No, this was completely straight with everything else. But you could see our tire tracks that went into the driveway. And we were like, what the hell? We don't know what that was, but we're getting out of here. So we go back home, and my parents come home after, they're off work, and we're telling them what happened. And they're like, okay, yeah, no, whatever. You guys, you're crazy. You didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Don't go back out there. You don't need to be out there anyway. And dropped it. So we were like, okay, you what do you do with it? You're a kid, and we're not going back out there because it scared us. And then it was probably, it was 10 then, and I was probably 15, 16, 17 maybe, when I started going out there with any regularity. It would be with friends. Katie's very small. There's not a lot to do, so we spent a lot of time driving the back roads around the area. And I always looked for this house. I could never find it. I remembered the general vicinity of where it was, but I never could see it. And then in 2012, I was working at the Historical Society, and we do this thing with Find a Grave at the time. And if you've ever used Find a Grave, and if you make an account, they have volunteers that will go out and take photos of headstones and different things for people that ask. And so all you have to do is, if you're a member, you can pull up like a cemetery, and it'll say, yes, there's so many active requests. And you can go through and find the names and everything. And then you can take those requests, go out to the cemetery, take the pictures, and then upload them for them. And we were doing that. Me and my friend Leslie, we had gone out in the Sandhills to this one particular cemetery to fill some requests. And we got those done. So I had my 35 millimeter with me. We got those done and we left. And this is a place that I am extremely familiar with. And we came back out and we happened to be going down this road. I happened to just look over to my right and I was like, oh my God, there's the house. And she knew immediately what I was talking about because she's grown up with me. She's heard this story a million times. And she's like, oh my God, are you serious? And I was like, stop. So she did. And from the road, I zoomed in and I took pictures of the house and the barn. And I was so excited because I finally found this freaking house I've been looking for, 30 years at least. And I was super excited about it. And then, I can't remember who I had told about at the time. I know, Leslie knew, and I know I told my brother and stuff. But he lives in another state, so I hadn't showed him the pictures or anything. And right after our group got together, after Border Town got together, I was telling Jess about it. And I was like, yeah, I've totally got these pictures I could show you. So I go to pull them up, and those pictures are no longer there. The pictures that we took of the graves for Find a Grave are still in there. But everything that had anything to do with that house, I know I took at least 4 or 5 pictures of it. They're not there at all. They're completely gone. I know they weren't. I didn't delete them. I know, no one else in the household would have deleted them at the time. No clue what. It's like once you acknowledge that, this is the thing, you go to pull them back. And I know I'd seen them since then. But yeah, for whatever reason, from that point forward, they don't exist anymore. Oh, I know what triggered it. Jess and we were talking about it, and she's like, let me ask my mom. My mom grew up out there. And so we were like, okay, yeah. So she talks to her mom and we explained, where the house was. And her mom's like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so's house. They tore that down in the 70s. And we were like, no, because I saw it in like the very late 70s, early 80s. And she said they tore it down like the early 70s. I saw it in the very late 70s, early 80s. And then I saw it again just in 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. And she was like, there's no way. It didn't exist then. And I'm like, okay, that's crazy. I've got pictures. Let me pull them up and show you. And that's when we pulled the pictures up. And that's when I realized the pictures are gone. They're not there anymore. It's like once you acknowledge the fact that the house should not have existed when I took the photos no longer exist. It was the weirdest thing. Still,
it's like the Back to the Future photo, right? Yeah, fading out.
It just fades away. Yeah, makes me wonder whatever the heck happened to it. Yeah, I don't know, but we did. Like Jess said earlier, we were able to locate the foundations of the house and the barn on Google Earth. So that was pretty cool. I did save that, and I'll have to find it. Hopefully it's still there. I'm sure it is. But yeah, really crazy story. Still don't know what to do with that. Not sure we'll ever figure that one out.
There you go, Enzo. You got the story.
Jumping timelines.
Yeah, that's what it's like. Yeah. Like
in 2011, the house still existed in some timeline, and because you weren't looking for it, you saw it.
Maybe because that was because at some point you just
we might mention that if our maps are correct and we've mapped the ley line correctly, that ley line goes right over the top of where that house is.
It does.
And it makes you wonder, you and your brother saw the skulls all perfectly set out as if it was some kind of a ritualistic type situation. It makes you wonder if maybe that old man that had lived there at that time back before was messing with the power off the ley lines in a way that maybe he shouldn't have.
I had never considered that.
It makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah,
it does.
Perhaps he kind of opened that house up kind of like how we think the Sally house really works, that it's a portal opening, that maybe that was a situation there with that house and you just happened to walk in on it the right time when it was open.
That would explain a lot, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, great. New rabbit hole.
I'm telling you, we should have named the show Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm telling you. We find a lot of rabbit holes on this show.
We can't actually name it the rabbit hole because there's an actual rabbit hole YouTube channel or whatever, and that guy is crazy. He actually wears like a bunny. He wears like a bunny.
Dude, now I have to go check it out.
It's weird. I found him. I don't know if Will's still on here or not, but I found that dude when Will and I were doing the podcast on CERN, and CERN was involved with the opening of a tunnel in Goddard, Switzerland. And somebody had filmed it, and it's the weirdest thing you've ever seen. But I actually had to go to the White Rabbit's channel because he's the only one that like showed it in full, so you could really see what all went on. It was this highly elaborate. Oh, sorry, Bronwyn's in here.
Is it? I thought it was a cat.
Yeah, it's a highly. It was like choreographed, almost like a play, but it involved like devil worship and stuff. It was really weird.
Hi, Bronwyn.
Hello, Bronwyn.
She's like, put me down. Quit being loud.
Jason's saying this story sounds familiar, almost like you've experienced something. This is not the only story out there about disappearing houses. And also, this is not the only time I've told this story. So if you've heard me on anything else, you may have heard, or you may have heard one of the guys reference it before, because we have talked about it a few times.
Yeah.
It's freaky.
It is a freaky story.
Yeah, it sets on a main ley line outside of here of town. It's an area that we often, well, I shouldn't say often. We haven't been out there in quite a while. But when we do go out that way, we usually check that spot. It's also a hot spot for us to use rods and EMF and recorders and stuff. We always manage to get the craziest stuff out there. It's never the same thing twice. And it's almost as if something's messing with us on purpose. It'll give us the weirdest answers to things. One day in particular, and this is actually Mike, our other investigator, or the fourth to our trio that's here tonight. One of his favorite stories to tell. He's very much into American Indian lore and legend and just the whole thing to it. And his phone ring is a tribal drum song. And we were working with the rods one day, and we were just getting the weirdest action with them and the weirdest answers. And the Ovilus was running, and it was popping out some really crazy answers for us. And we kept trying to get it to tell us what it was. You know, did it used to be human? Is it elemental? You know, what are you? And Mike suddenly got a call on his phone, and I had my rods out and they were pointing straight forward, and the tribal music popped on really fast. And the minute that tribal music popped on, my rods slammed into my chest to point at Mike's phone. So it's just the craziest stuff happens there at that place.
It really does.
The house has never come back for us, unfortunately. So
no,
I would much love to see it.
I would love for you guys to see it. You know, you always have that. I know what I saw. And my friend, and actually we called Leslie that day, didn't we, Jess? And I was like, do you remember this? And she was like, absolutely, I remember this, because I'd heard this story a million times and I actually got to see it. And when I told her the pictures had disappeared, she was like, you're kidding me. How does that happen? How does that happen? We don't know. We have no clue. But at least I wasn't by myself either time that I saw it, because it does make you feel a little bit crazy, you know, like, am I losing my mind? I don't think I am, because, you know, if I am, everybody else is too. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's just not out of the realm of possibilities.
Yeah.
Right.
And in the grand scheme of things, disappearing, reappearing houses are not odd. They happen a lot more than you think. We actually have a couple of them close to us. There's a famous one down in Pawhuska, which is about an hour away from us. that pops in and out all the time. And there's some very famous ones. If you get up online and look it up, it's actually a very interesting topic. If you want to like lose yourself for an evening, just look up disappearing houses, reappearing houses, and it'll garner you a cornucopia of fantastic stories, especially like Pam talking about the pictures disappearing. There's a very famous one that happened in England. These two couples decided to go on vacation together, and they went out into the mountains or wherever they close to them, and they found a little tiny inn that they thought was just so quaint because it was so old-fashioned looking, and it was super cheap to stay there, and it was very beautiful. And they stayed there, and it had a dining room in it, and they went to dinner all together and had a wonderful meal, and was just shocked at the prices, how cheap it was. They walked around the grounds and they took tons of pictures because it was so picturesque there. And they slept overnight, and they got up in the morning and got all their stuff together and left off. And they stopped at a little restaurant not a mile away from the place to have some breakfast before they left. And they were telling their waitress, they were like, "We had such a great stay. We stayed at the such and such inn." And she was like, "What are you talking about?" And they told her all about it. And she was like, "There's no inn there." And they were like, "Yes, there is." And she was like, "I've lived here all my life and there is no inn there. There's nothing there." And just to prove her wrong, they drove back to like just show themselves. They were like, "Yeah, it's right there." And it was not there at all. But in the roll of film, it was pretty much like Pam went through. They had all their pictures up to the point that they got to the inn, and they had the pictures they took after. But the pictures of while they were staying at the inn were just gone. They were just blank.
Yeah,
that goes back to kind of what is it? I can't remember if it was Willie or Enzo talking about do things fix themselves? You know, do if something goes awry in one timeline, does it like work to fix itself to get it back to where it's supposed to be? Maybe that's what's happening with the disappearing photos of these things. You know, it shouldn't exist. Therefore, any evidence that says that it exists needs to be wiped. What does the wiping, you know?
Your subconscious?
Maybe it's the computer programmer redoing stuff.
Oh, geez, great. That's as good of answer as any, honestly. Wow, that's
who knows? That's what makes this a fun subject.
It does.
We could be right, we could be wrong, we could be nowhere near.
Yeah. It could go in a million different directions.
Enzo saying the Back to the Future analogy would work here for the pictures. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. And he said, "I'd love to see it too, but I'd be concerned about getting whisked away to wherever it goes when it blinks out."
Right.
Yeah, you know how concerning it is to realize that when I was 10, I was there, standing right there, and luckily didn't get injured.
What if that fence had formed behind you?
So, and that also kind of leads you along the idea of look at the missing 411s that Dave Paulides works with. You've got people that were there 1 minute and then they're completely gone, or they end up in somewhere completely not where they're supposed to be.
Right.
Or wearing clothing that they didn't have, or wearing one sock in the middle of a whole bunch of, thorns and stuff.
I would love to talk with him sometime.
I would too. That would be a fascinating.
That's my idea. I know that David Paulides leans heavily towards Bigfoot and a little bit of alien, but I think that it absolutely has something to do with time slips.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and he's kind of mentioned that too. Like, where did they go? People were there; they should have saw him. But then 6 months later, they find his body right there where everybody was looking.
Right where everybody was searching. Like, there was that really famous one. It was that dude from Missouri that went missing, and they ended up finding his body somewhere outside of Las Vegas, out in the desert. He had gone out for a hike or something like that and just disappeared. He was with friends, and like he was right behind the friends, and the next second he was gone. And they hunted and hunted for him for weeks along this trail that everybody hikes. There've been hundreds of people on it over and over and over again, let alone the searchers and stuff. And a guy was camping out there and got up to start his hike for the day and found his dead body right there. And it was partially mummified, as if he'd been laying there for that long. But the insane thing was that when they moved his body, there were hikers' footprints underneath of him that matched the ones before and after him, as if somebody had come and gently laid him down on top of that. But he'd been laying there long enough to like mummify.
That's crazy.
How does that work? Unless it's some kind of a time slip thing,
Or dimensional.
Maybe.
Enzo says dimensional instability.
Yeah.
Seems likely. It could be.
Program
Where did
glitch.
these people go, and why did they come back? Or why have we never seen them again?
Literally, there's stories about people out hiking in the national forest and stuff, and they've watched the person in front of them vanish in front of their eyes. They didn't go up ahead of them and get lost. They didn't stay behind and get lost. They were literally 3 feet in front of them, and they literally watched them dissolve.
And it is funny how the national park system, i.e. the government, doesn't keep track of it.
Mm-mm.
And if you want any information,
it's almost an intentional non-keeping track of.
It's very, very suspicious the way they act about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that brings up the whole Eisenhower deal with the aliens, where they could kidnap whoever they want, as long as they let us have technology.
I had to go look back in the chat a little bit. Alicia said something earlier. She said, do you think it's possible that in other timelines we're like the NPCs that we can slip into should something happen? So like you're an NPC in this timeline, you die in the other one.
That would explain a lot.
It would, wouldn't it?
If you exist in multiple timelines, but your consciousness can only exist in one, maybe a couple at a time. So, that would explain a lot, because I know some people, I swear they're NPCs, because there ain't nothing there.
Yeah.
The lights are on, but nobody's home.
Maybe that's where fate gets involved. Maybe ourselves and all these other lines that we aren't currently nesting in literally have a path that they take. So this must happen, and this must happen, and this must happen, and this must happen. And it's not until you inhabit that version of yourself that you can change your course and start making decisions. Maybe that's where we get the NPC thing from. Maybe they literally are just on their path and they're doing what they're supposed to do. And things are happening that are supposed to happen. And then it doesn't change until you're inhabiting it.
Maybe so. I don't know.
Good thought, Alicia. Interesting theory.
But, you could drive yourself crazy with this.
Oh, absolutely.
You absolutely can.
The more you think about it, the more I'm like, there's...
If the government knows this may happen for the 411 cases in the national parks, why wouldn't they close them down?
The national parks?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's because they know it happens to them and there's a reason for it.
And Chris says, Enzo, I feel like they don't care what happens to anything. Well, we're talking about the government here, so I will categorically declare that the government does not care about you. They care about your tax dollars, but absolutely nothing else. That's just my opinion.
That's a little concerning too, Enzo. A lot of Polity's commonalities for missing 411 cases do seem to match your area. Bodies of water, lots of quartz, exposed granite, etc. And I'm pretty sure, I can't remember, I have to ask Jess on this, But I'm pretty sure most of the national parks have pretty major ley lines under them too, don't they?
Most of
Or
them.
have we looked into that?
Most of them do, yeah.
Yeah. But I wouldn't say that one's a causality for the other, because we have so many national parks and they take up such large swaths of land.
True.
And there are so many major ley lines, you're going to run over them. You know what I mean?
It's going to be hard to miss them.
It's going to be hard to miss them. So I can't
drive over 10 on the way to work, you know?
Yeah, I can't say that, you know, they're there because of the ley lines, or the ley lines are there because of them, or, you know, I think we just have so many in the US, and that's more or less, yeah, it's great to have these national parks, and it kind of saves, you know, our indigenous species of fauna and flora and blah, 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 blah. But it's also land the government owns.
True.
Huge swaths that I don't think people realize how much of the national parks you're not allowed to go into.
Right.
Yeah, we have our little areas where you can hike and swim and fish and blah, 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 blah. But there are huge areas that you cannot go into.
And people were displaced from these places. People had homesteads in a lot of these parks, and they were declared national parks, and they were forced to move.
Yes. And the American Indians.
And the American Indians, yes.
Yeah. So it's land you can't take, the government owns. So that's just another flip of the coin there.
And what are they saving it for?
Yeah. Well, you know, now you're heading back into Eisenhower territory again.
Are they saving it because they
Eisenhower show.
Plan on declaring themselves a monarchy and using it for estates for the rich and wealthy that they want to have run the place?
Or they're using it to allow the aliens to come in and do their dirty work.
That's true. We need this person to disappear because he's asking too many questions. Which reminds me, I am never going to a national park.
Right?
Right. I ask too many questions.
I will watch the TV specials, and if I'm that interested, I'll watch
although to be fair, Dave says that nobody yet has disappeared who carried both a firearm and a personal locator beacon. So, I mean, there's that. Yes, that's interesting. Nobody who is.
Did everybody hear that? If you're going to go to a national park, carry those two things at least.
Yes.
So does it mean if you have a personal locator beacon, they're going to find you, basically?
Well, there's been people with personal locators that were never found, but nobody carrying, and people with firearms who've been lost, but nobody who was carrying both items has ever been lost.
Gotcha. Interesting. Wonder why.
Well, you know, part of it could be they were just better prepared than everybody else.
Could be. I don't know.
It could be a lot of reasons, but let's just go with the most obvious. They don't want to be disappeared.
Yeah. True.
So we could also talk about, since we're talking about disappearing houses, we could also talk about disappearing land masses.
Oh, yes. The Hesperides Islands.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. That's a fun one.
And St. Brendan's, part of the, or
St. Brendan's,
used to be, or was a part of the Canary Islands that supposedly was never there, but was there.
And
was never there, but was there.
From satellite pictures, you can see a landmass under the water that could have been an island at one time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That'll pull you back into us too. Where did it go?
The exact shape of the island as it is on maps. So that is pretty fascinating right there.
It is.
Yeah. An interesting side note, the Hesperides. So it was a supposed archipelago island in the Pacific, wasn't it? Or was it the Atlantic? Anywho's,
I can't remember. With South.
Rosemary Guiley discussed it in great length in one of her, I think it was like her Timeslips book or something like that.
Yes.
And Mark and Phil attempted to do a story on it, but actually couldn't find a whole lot of information about it. I found a little bit on it. But it was looking to be more like a hoax or just a little story that was maybe told somewhere, and Rosemary picked it up and just kind of ran with it. Until a year ago, we were doing the ancient history of the Americas. We were doing a series on that, and we decided to do one on the annals of Kentucky. And I pulled out all my Annals of Kentucky and stuff and was really doing an actual read on it, like thoroughly reading it. And it actually mentions the Hesperides in it too. And the weird coinage they had there, and the money, and the strange people that live there, and the fact that it wasn't always there. It actually said that in there. It's not always there. You have to be there at the right time.
The Ancient Annals of Kentucky. That's worth a read if you guys are into.
It is crazy. It's cool,
especially if you were looking for stuff about Atlantis, giants. I mean, they cover a bunch of stuff in there. It's definitely worth a read, and you can find the unedited versions online.
Slips in Time and Space. That was the Rosemary Island Guiley book that was in. It's an excellent book. If you want a good time slippy, time anomaly book, get that one. That one and Time Storms by Jenny Randalls.
Yes.
It's a little expensive, but totally worth it.
I do not have that one in my collection, but
yeah, I don't have my books behind me tonight.
Oh man,
I have it. You have to hold them up.
It's
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, she went. She's going for it.
She's going for him. Now.
Yeah, I have a different back. I'm in my studio tonight because I was having so much problems with my internet. I finally just decided to hard route it from my router to my laptop. So I moved to my studio to get away from the air conditioner that is god awful loud.
It seems to be working a little bit. Now, the Greeks talked about the Hesperides.
Mm-hmm.
And they're considered mythical. But what if they weren't? I mean, we've got all these stories. And like I said, St. Brendan's is really interesting because you can see on Google Earth the shadow of a mountaintop underneath the water that is the shape of the island as it appeared on the maps. So either it's here in some timelines and sometimes it's not, or possibly it sank. So, I mean.
So, in Slips in Time and Space, it gives the coordinates even of the Hesperides. And
I have
was in the Pacific. Yeah.
So.
But yeah, here's Slips in Time and Space and Time Storms.
Hello, Cybot.
Great reads.
Our friend from Sweden has stopped by to see us again.
Hello.
I hope you're enjoying the show.
I might have to throw my light. It's getting so dark in here. The sun went down and I'm losing all my natural light.
I did that the other day. I forgot to turn my ring light on. I couldn't figure out why it just kept getting darker and darker.
I've got my ring light, but it's still getting like super dark. Maybe I'll go flip on the big light. It'll probably be too bright then. Well, let's see.
So Enzo says, so it disappeared post Younger Dryas event, or has appeared since then? It has appeared since then. So that's why I'm wondering if it's not some sort of dimensional thing where sometimes it's above water and sometimes it's below water. It's not supposed. St. Brendan's is not supposed to be occupied, is it?
I don't think
not
so.
by humans.
It's one of the smaller islands off the Canaries.
Right.
I think I recall from some of the stories we read about it, it was a lot of people seeing it in the distance from another occupied island. It was something as it was part of what you would see off in the distance that would suddenly be gone, or it would suddenly be back.
Right. So, I mean, that could be a time slip. So it could have been pre-Younger Dryas, or it could have been a dimensional slip, and in the other dimension, it's higher and above water. But the shape of it on the map and the shape of the shadow that you can see on Google Earth are very similar. Yeah. So
It's pretty fascinating.
it is weird. And then the Hesperides it's appeared on and off, and they've had somebody. There was a pamphlet about visiting it.
Yeah.
Someplace. And then there's examples of postage stamps from there celebrating the moon landing.
Yes.
So it's appeared fairly recently in history. That's kind of weird.
Says, according to papers, the islands were discovered in 1850 by a Walish boy, I said that backwards. A Scottish whaler named McNall, and claimed it as his personal property. I was trying to zip through this and see when it was last. Yeah, 3 rectangular postage stamps issued by this non-existent republic commemorated freedom of religion, space travel, and the rights of mankind. The stamps came in denominations of 50, 75 unknown monetary units.
So, yeah, there's that.
Right?
And that's not, those 2 islands aren't the only ones either. There's a whole
No, there's a whole bunch of them. Those are just the ones I know about right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Well, I always find something new in that book.
I do too.
The question is it a time slip? Is it a glitch in the Matrix? Is it a Mandela?
I don't know.
That's a good question.
I mean, they got the stamps. So
are those 3 things actually all the same thing, and we've just been going on an assumed notion that's wrong?
Could be.
I mean, you don't know. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah. We sit here. I love it because I know when people watch, they leave us with more questions than what they had when they came to us.
And we
leave here with more questions.
Please do your own research, and if you find out something, let us know, because we really want to know.
Yeah.
And a lot of these, if you don't have access to these books, a lot of them you can find on Scribd. I absolutely love Scribd. It's kind of like Kindle Unlimited for weirdos, because it's got all my fun books on there.
There you go.
Yeah, I would suggest it to anybody.
But I love speculating about all this stuff. I mean, because it could be a lot of things, and it could be my imagination. I mean, any of those things is fine, because, hey, it's fun.
It is
until it's scary, and then it's scary.
I'll tell you what, when it comes to the disappearing time and things like that, it's off-putting. It throws you off. I know when we figured out what happened to us, you don't know where. There's no booklet to tell you, okay, this is the next step you need to take. This is what you need to look at. It's like you're foundering out there trying to figure out which way to go. Yeah. And it's freaky, isn't it? We got to a point in where we were investigating this to where I was like, I think we need to take a step back and take a breath and just maybe set this aside for a while and pick it up later and look at it again, because you get that feeling like you're getting in a little bit too deep into something. We started to feel like we were going to John Keel ourselves at some point.
We almost killed ourselves.
We've talked about this on many occasions, and with other investigators and people in the field that are very deep into the investing and the researching side of things. I'm not talking about just plain old workaday Ghostbusters that like to go out on the weekends and look at haunted cemeteries. We get to this point where you've gone too deep, and you know you've gone too deep because the synchronicities start happening and weirdness starts just following you wherever you go. We've learned how to compartmentalize our lives, to where here's our normal everyday life, here's our ghost hunting life, here's our research life, here's our podcast life. Because if you don't do it, you go absolutely insane. There's been numerous occasions where I told Mark and Pam, I was like, I'm out for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about anything paranormal for a couple weeks because I can't step 2 feet without something freaky happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I open a book, it's another synchronicity to something else that happened in my life earlier. And you have to slow that down. So I don't know what that is.
And what's interesting, when you do take a step back, it's not like it loses anything. It's like when you come back to it, it's like it's just been sitting there waiting on you to come back, and pick it up.
Very patiently, yes.
Yes. And I've heard other people that are paranormal researchers, and pretty famous ones, say the same thing. That it seems like when they come back to a topic, it's just like it's there waiting on
It's
you.
just fresh and ready to go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the synchronicities will pick back up, and they'll die down when you need them to die down, when you need to step away, and then when you bring your focus back to it, it seems like it will come back. Yes, Enzo, that is true.
Yes.
Waiting ominously.
That's what they say about me.
Mm-hmm. It is ominous. There's been occasions. I mean, we've done it all three together. We've been together. We use our meetings. We do our regular meeting stuff, but we also use those meetings to discuss what we've been working on and what we've been researching and anything that we found out. And we just do it kind of like what we're doing here. We just talk about all things paranormal. And we always end up coming with new connections and new ideas about how things are working. And we have literally been setting all three together and had an epiphany between the three of us that literally shifted our lives enough that we left that meeting unsure,
dazed
about our future.
Yeah.
And wondering what we have stepped into, because the epiphany worked all the way across. Like we were like, yeah, this is real, because then this works and this works and this works and this works if this one thing is true. And you leave there feeling like you got punched in the gut.
Yes.
And then it'll cannonball. It'll do exactly what I said. We'll all three start having synchronicities about that topic, and stuff will start popping up, and we have to go, whoa, all right, we're going to shut it down for a little while, because you can't. It's just like Pam said, you will John Keel yourself.
Mm-hmm.
He went too deep. He went too deep, and
he got a little bonkers there.
Yeah. So you got to keep it. You got to keep it compartmentalized, because if you don't, you'll go insane.
Mm-hmm. You will.
And is that a defense mechanism from nature?
Very likely. I
would think so. Like maybe we're programmed to get scared when we start stepping into stuff we're not supposed to know.
Because I really believe a lot of this stuff isn't paranormal. I think it's just normal. Everybody has agreed subconsciously to just ignore.
It's interesting how you said, or maybe we're programmed to have that fear.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Da, da, da. I was trying to scare us all again.
She said, a little off topic, does anyone else remember Madagascar was supposed to be this small island off of Africa that nobody lived on, a wildlife area? So I somehow remember being told this in grade school.
Chris says she remembered being taught that. I always remembered it being a fairly sizable island. And I know that there were people on it, villages, and I mean, it was a shipping area. there was a lot of trade in and out of Madagascar in the 1800s. But they do have a lot of really weird critters.
Mm-hmm. I honestly can't say I remember really anything about it. I mean, I remember that we learned it, but I don't remember anything specific about it.
It was in my social studies book. I mean, they had pictures of villagers and whatnot, and that tells you how long it's been since I've been in school, because we still called it social studies.
We called it that too. No, that's not allowed, Jess.
Sorry. I had a very early morning. I was up at 5 this morning, so.
Ugh.
Painting windows.
Oh, fun.
Yay. In the 180,000 degree weather. Woo.
Oh my gosh, it's
right
so
in the direct sun.
stupid.
I got to go back into it tomorrow. I'm going to be in it all week. I bet I worked 6 days this week, right through all the hot. But they're giving heat indexes of 117 tomorrow.
Wow.
It's crazy.
One of the Tulsa weather guys, he said, I think the heat index down there was 128 today. And he's sure that just busted every record he was going to check. It was Mike Collier.
That's no bueno. No bueno.
I stopped. I was painting. I was doing window paintings for a business here in town. I started at 7 and I had to stop at 10:30 because the sidewalk that I was on was already at 110.
Paint
with
was
the sun beaming on me.
Get it on there, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure everybody can see how shiny I am. I have so much aloe on right now. I got really bad sunburn. So I had aloe on, and then I tried to put makeup on over the top of it so I didn't look like a monster, because I had my sunglasses on, so I've got like burn.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Luckily, I work inside in the shade, even though, according to our thermometer, it was, 80% humidity and 95 degrees.
The thing that sucked was I was painting fall. A fall.
You're painting what?
Oh no!
Like with some Halloween stuff mixed in, and I was like, "This is so not working."
That's so not right. So not right.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll conjure it, to get here faster.
I hope so. I keep saying in 2 or 3 weeks we'll be in the better weather, but then it keeps, rebelling.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, and I just came from Indiana, where it was down in like the 62 degrees at night.
Oh man.
I know. I was like, we got out of the car in I think it was somewhere in Missouri. We stepped out of the car and we were like, oh God, we're back. It was so bad. It was like 103 or something. We were like, no. Set out, your glasses immediately fog.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nope. Can we turn around and go back?
Enzo says he only remembers Madagascar from the stories of the finding the coelacanth there. It was once thought to be extinct for millions of years ago. Nope. They found them in the local fish market.
Oh. Yikes.
Nice.
That's funny. Whoopsie.
My question is, did they taste good?
Ew.
Well, obviously, if they were at the market, somebody bought
that's
them.
true. That's true. Somebody.
Yeah, someone was eating them.
All right. I don't have a lot more, ladies.
Yeah, we should probably get off here. We've been on here for 2 hours now.
Yeah.
Time slip, man. How could it be 2 hours already?
I could have sworn we'd only been on here for a half an hour.
Well, this went really fast. This really did.
It did go fast. But we can go through the chat and see the timeline. So
that's true.
There's a lot of stuff in the chat.
There was a lot of good conversation, a lot of good interaction.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody stopping by, joining the chat. For those of you who are listening on your local podcast provider, if you get a chance to tune into our lives on Facebook, YouTube, and we're now on Twitch. If you get a chance to watch us live and watch the chat is a lot of fun, and you get to interact with us. which we enjoy and we hope you do too. So with that being said, I guess it's time to go.
Yeah,
And
getting late.
And good night, folks.
Night, everyone.